From the 34th floor of his Manhattan office, Dominic Everhart could see the skyline stretch endlessly beyond the tinted glass. At 53, he was the architect of an empire that began humbly in a dorm room at NYU, and now stood as the titan that was Everhart Systems, a tech giant with holdings in artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and global logistics. His salt and pepper hair was swept neatly to one side, his steel gray suit impeccably tailored, every detail a testament to the life he'd engineered out of ambition and sheer will. But in that moment, none of it mattered. He stood there, immobile, jaw tight, staring at a message that flickered on his phone's screen like a slap to the face. It was his daughter, Delilah. She had sent a casual, emoji-laden text saying she wouldn't make it to the launch of their new sustainability initiative. The same one she had publicly committed to championing, the one he had built with her in mind. Instead, she was apparently at some retreat in Palm Springs. The tone was glib, the message brief, and the damage immeasurable. This wasn't the first time. Not even close. Dominic set the phone down with force, the clatter echoing off the glass and concrete. Delilah had flaked on the gala he asked her to co-host the previous month. Before that, she had ghosted a major planning session with European investors, opting instead to post sun-drenched selfies from their family home in Capri. His company, his legacy, his name, Everhart, meant something. Precision, reliability, vision. But his daughter seemed intent on turning it into a meme, a punchline. Her social feed was a running montage of indulgence, high fashion, yachts, exclusive lounges, champagne brunches, and flippant captions that made it clear she thought adulthood was optional. Dominic scrolled through older photos, searching for something that might reconnect him to the girl she once was. There, an image from when she was small, perched on his shoulders at a company picnic, beaming with admiration and trust. It felt like a memory from another life. The girl in the photo had spark. She had sincerity. When had she disappeared? And when had she been replaced by this careless, aloof young woman who viewed her father's accomplishments as an endless buffet of privileges with none of the cost? He thought of his own past, the part of his life no one in the boardroom ever asked about. He had grown up in the shadow of cornfields and dairy barns, in the small town of Hollow Creek, Vermont. His parents had scraped a living from a modest dairy farm. As a child, he had risen before dawn to milk cows by flashlight, helped fix fences, and worked every summer to save enough for school. By 12, he was already doing the farm's accounts. By 17, he had secured a scholarship and headed to the city, determined to build a future where he wouldn't have to worry about late mortgage payments or broken tractors. Delilah had never known that kind of life. After her mother died, when Delilah was barely 11, Dominic had filled the gaping absence with indulgence. His guilt had worn a platinum edge, private tutors, elite academies, vacations that spanned continents. If she wanted a horse, she got a stable. When she asked to study in Tokyo, he bought an apartment in Shibuya. When she wrecked her first sports car, he gave her a newer, faster one. Each gesture a peace offering from a father too often absent, too buried in board meetings and international flights to really listen. But now the result of all those gestures stood before him in neon-lit headlines and plummeting investor confidence. A soft chime from his office intercom pulled him back to the present. "Mr. Everhart," his assistant's voice carried through crisply, "the board is assembled." Dominic smoothed his tie and adjusted his cufflinks. He passed a wall filled with framed magazine covers and commendations, Fortune's Tech Visionary of the Year, Forbes' Top Innovators, and stepped into the corridor with a jaw set like steel. The meeting was routine by structure, but the undercurrent was tense. Questions flew about the launch projections, about the sustainability tech and its viability, about donor confidence. And then came the question he'd dreaded. Wasn't Delilah supposed to present the Outreach Division's progress today? It was Marjorie Linwood, a senior partner known for her no-nonsense precision. That was the understanding, Dominic replied smoothly. But she encountered a scheduling conflict. Our director of outreach will be covering in her place. The lie burned his tongue. The real truth was even worse. She just didn't care. By the time he returned to his office, the stock had dropped 4%, and several donor organizations had quietly pulled their support. He opened her Instagram. There she was, leaning against a rooftop pool cabana, laughing, her drink glittering in the sun. The caption read, "Why stress when you can sip? Hashtag our CEO child, hashtag blessed and unbothered." Dominic's hands clenched. This wasn't just a bad look, it was a threat to everything he'd worked for. The social division he'd created was supposed to make a difference, and give Delilah a role of substance. He had thought that by embedding her into something meaningful, she might grow into her name. But she had treated the whole thing like a seasonal internship, optional, forgettable. That night, as his driver took him home through the rain-slicked streets of the Upper East Side, Dominic sat in a silence so deep it seemed to soak into the leather seats. The city lights blurred against the window as he turned over a thought he hadn't dared say aloud in years. Maybe it was time for a reset. Not a lecture, not a financial freeze, not another empty ultimatum. Something real. He opened his contacts and scrolled until he found the name, Cal Bennett. His oldest friend, the one person still tethered to that dusty Vermont farm and the lessons it had drilled into them. Without hesitation, he dialed. When Cal picked up, his voice was just as steady and unhurried as ever. "Dom, what's the occasion?" "I need a favor," Dominic said, staring out at the traffic. "A big one." He arrived home to find the house ablaze with lights. Music pulsed from somewhere deep inside, and unfamiliar cars lined the circular driveway. The doorman was gone, and the entryway, a minimalist masterpiece of polished stone and curated art, reeked of spilled liquor and expensive perfume. Inside, the scene was pure chaos. People lounged across furniture he had flown in from Milan. Someone was DJing from his grand piano. A couple was taking selfies in front of the sculpture he'd donated to the Met for restoration. At the center of it all stood Delilah, radiant and indifferent, holding court with a crowd of trust fund darlings and aspiring influencers. When she spotted him, her grin widened with zero shame. "Daddy," she sang, walking over in heels that cost more than most people's rent. "Didn't expect you till tomorrow." "Party's over," he said simply, and the tone in his voice made half the room freeze. Delilah scoffed. "Oh, come on. They'll be gone soon. Chill, Dad." He looked at the people in his home, these strangers sipping his rare whiskey, treating his space like a backdrop for their selfies. "You have 10 minutes to clear the house," he said. After that, security's calling the cops. And for once, he meant every word. The reaction was swift and chaotic, like rats fleeing a ship. Delilah stood glaring at him, arms folded. "You humiliated me," she spat. "You do that just fine on your own," Dominic said, walking past her. "You were supposed to present the community initiative today. Instead, you were posting margaritas and memes." She rolled her eyes, but he didn't let her walk away. "You cost the company millions in donor losses. This isn't just a bad look, it's a disaster. You think I can patch this up with PR? You think your last name protects you forever?" Her defiance cracked slightly. "So what now? You're cutting me off, grounding me? Real original." "No," Dominic said, voice steady. "You're going to Hollow Creek." Her face twisted. To what? To work on Cal's farm. No phone, no cards, no Wi-Fi unless it's for emergencies. 1 month, from sunrise to sundown. Real work. You're insane, she said. I'm not a child. Exactly, he replied. You're not. So act like it, or you can walk away. No trust fund, no penthouse, nothing. The silence that followed was thick with shock. Then she hissed, I hate you. You can hate me all you want, Dominic said. From Vermont. And that was how it began. Not with a scandal or a scandalous headline, but with a decision made in exhaustion and quiet fury. 1 month, 1 farm, 1 chance to find the daughter he used to know, or lose her forever. The private jet dipped below the cloud line, revealing a landscape that might as well have been another planet. Gone were the jagged steel silhouettes and ceaseless hum of Manhattan. Instead, wide-open land stretched as far as the eye could see. Dense woods flanked the pastures, and quiet hills rolled like waves across the Vermont countryside. Hollow Creek was nowhere on any influential map, but for Dominic Everhart, it was the origin point, the soil from which everything had grown. For Delilah, though, it felt like exile. She hadn't spoken since they boarded, her arms folded across a designer travel outfit more appropriate for a climate-controlled boutique than an early spring morning in the Northeast. Her oversized sunglasses, despite the overcast skies, served more as armor than fashion. She hadn't cried, not exactly, but there had been moments during the flight where he saw her grip her phone tighter, no doubt hoping one of her connections could engineer an escape from this humiliating banishment. None had come through. There were consequences now, and for once, Dominic wasn't backing down. He broke the silence near landing. We'll be on the ground in about 10 minutes. She didn't answer at first, then pulled out one earbud and muttered, Should I expect to develop Stockholm Syndrome by the end of the week, or do I get a break in between shovel shifts? He exhaled through his nose, the way he used to when boards turned combative, or lawyers pushed irrelevant clauses. It's not a punishment, he said, evenly, though even he barely believed the line anymore. It's an opportunity. She turned toward him, incredulous. To what? Become lactose intolerant? Get trampled by your buddy's cow? He didn't flinch. To learn what it feels like to earn something. Even a simple meal. Even a good night's sleep. I already know who I am, she said, drawing the blanket tighter around her. And I already know where I come from. A penthouse, not some tractor town with dial-up. Hollow Creek, he said calmly. Population 2,000. And half your DNA comes from there, whether you like it or not. The plane touched down on a small strip that looked more like a repurposed road than a real airfield. A rusted, sun-faded pickup waited near the fence, the only vehicle for miles. Delilah squinted through the window and groaned. Please tell me that's not our ride. That, Dominic said, is Cal Bennett's truck. He's been driving it since before you were born. Cal himself approached with the same slow, deliberate gait Dominic remembered from their teenage summers. He looked exactly the same, just more weathered by time, a little more lined around the eyes, a little slower to grin, but with that same immovable sense of steadiness that had made him more like a brother than a friend. Well, I'll be damned, Cal said, pulling Dominic into a bear hug. Still wearing those city shoes I see. What are those, $300 loafers? Dominic gave a small laugh. 4, actually, inflation. Cal looked past him to Delilah, who was stepping off the plane like someone approaching a crime scene. Last time I saw you, kid, you were about knee-high, tugging at your dad's coattails and asking for more lemonade. Delilah offered a weak smile. Yeah, I don't remember any of that. If Cal was offended, he didn't show it. Memory's funny like that. Doesn't matter, though. You'll get to know this place again soon enough. She didn't answer, only stood by as Cal loaded her expensive luggage into the back of the truck where it looked comically out of place between a coil of rope and a dented toolbox. "I said 1 suitcase," Dominic muttered. "This is me packing light," Delilah replied, folding her arms. "Besides, you said practical. That means options." Cal chuckled, tightening a strap around the bags. "We'll find you some boots that can handle cow crap better than those leather runway things you're wearing. I'd give 'em 5 minutes, tops." They climbed in, Dominic and Cal in the front, Delilah wedged in back with her designer luggage and a wary expression. The ride from the airstrip to the Bennett family farm took less than 15 minutes, but to Delilah it stretched like hours. The roads were narrow, flanked by trees that pressed inward, as if conspiring against outsiders. No cell towers, no coffee shops, just miles of quiet and space. The farm appeared around a bend, a white farmhouse with navy shutters, 2 stories and wrapped in a porch that sagged with age but radiated a lived-in kind of grace. Red barns and grain silos dotted the background. Cows grazed in a fenced pasture that dipped into a sun-dappled valley. To Delilah, it all looked like a painting, one she had no desire to step into. "Welcome to Bennett Hollow," Cal said proudly, cutting the engine. Delilah stayed in the truck, staring at the house like it might bite. She finally stepped down, boots sinking slightly in the thaw-softened ground. "Of course," she muttered. "Mud." From the porch a woman emerged, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted dish towel. Her hair was tied back, and her jeans looked a decade old, but her smile was genuine. "You must be Delilah," she called. "I'm May, Cal's better half. Come in before the biscuits get cold." Delilah offered her hand, which May ignored in favor of a quick, firm hug. "We don't stand on ceremony around here, honey, just manners and meals." Inside, the farmhouse smelled like coffee, cinnamon, and soap. The furniture was simple. Wood floors creaked, and every wall seemed to hold photos of smiling people doing honest work. "Your room's upstairs," May said, "first door on the left. I laid out some of my old work clothes just till we can get to town and find you a few things of your own." Delilah made a face. "I brought clothes." "You brought New York," May replied with a smile. "Here, you'll need Vermont." Dominic helped carry the final suitcase to the stairs, setting it down with a soft thud. "This is it," he said, looking at his daughter. "A month. 1 month. No shortcuts." "Whatever," she muttered, already dragging her luggage up the stairs. "I'll play along, but don't expect a miracle." "I don't," he said softly. "Just something real." Downstairs, May gave him a look. "She'll be fine," she said, "eventually." Dominic nodded. He turned to Cal. "I'll come back in a week to check in." "We'll keep her alive until then," Cal replied. "And maybe teach her a thing or two about fences and hard mornings." As Dominic stepped back outside, Delilah stood in the upstairs window watching him. He gave her a small wave, but she didn't return it. She just watched until his car disappeared down the dirt road. Then she turned away, dropped onto the unmade bed, and buried her face in her hands. Her father was gone. Her phone had no signal. And outside, a rooster crowed like an alarm bell from a world she didn't understand. The first day of Delilah Everhart's new life had begun, and whether she liked it or not, it had no pause button. The next morning arrived like a slap. The light through the thin curtains was pale and cold, the kind of light that didn't gently coax you awake, but instead accused you of being lazy for still lying down. Delilah sat upright slowly, her limbs sore in a way that couldn't be blamed on anything more than a restless sleep and the mental weight of where she was. The bed was smaller than she was used to, the mattress firmer, the silence outside the window uncanny. No sirens, no horns, no hum of 24-hour life. Just birdsong. And maybe, if she wasn't hallucinating, the moo of something very large and alive. She squinted out the window and saw a herd moving in the distant pasture, led by a man in boots and a wide-brimmed hat. Was that Cal? Or someone else? It was hard to tell. Everyone out here looked like they'd stepped out of a documentary about grit. Downstairs, May was already moving through the kitchen like she'd been up for hours. The smell of bacon was rich in the air, accompanied by something vaguely sweet and earthy. "Morning, hun," she called without looking up, flipping something in a cast-iron skillet. "Hope you slept all right. There's coffee in the press, and oatmeal if you're not a bacon person." Delilah blinked. I usually just do matcha and a protein bar." May looked at her like she'd spoken Greek. "Well, this'll stick to your ribs better. You'll need it." She slid a heavy mug across the table. Today's orientation. Chores, stalls, fence checks. Maybe even meet a calf or two if you're lucky. Delilah opened her mouth to object, then remembered. This was the deal. 1 month. No excuses, no bailout. "Fine," she muttered, sipping the coffee and instantly grimacing. It was strong, like asphalt strong, but weirdly satisfying. After breakfast, she found herself stepping into a pair of boots that weren't hers, jeans that were baggy and stiff, and a flannel shirt that smelled faintly of lavender detergent and sunshine. It was humiliating, and it made her feel invisible. For someone who had spent years cultivating a presence so sharp and curated it could silence a room, this was a costume of anonymity. She hated it, but she wore it. Out in the yard, Cal was waiting with a clipboard and a faintly amused smile. "You're not running yet," he said. "That's a start." Delilah rolled her eyes. "Give it 5 minutes." But she followed him. Across the pasture, through a barn that smelled like hay and sweat and something faintly sour, past chickens that scattered like paparazzi dodging a scandal, and eventually to the milking station, which looked both ancient and alarmingly high-tech at once. "This is where it all begins," Cal said, gesturing grandly. "Meet Clover." A cow blinked at her, huge eyes patient and slow. Delilah stared. "You've got to be kidding." "Not even a little," Cal said. "You'll be assisting with the morning round. We use machines, but there's prep. Clean the udders, check for any infection, monitor flow. They're creatures, not machines. They need to be treated right." Delilah gagged as she stepped closer, holding the damp cloth Cal handed her like it might bite. "You want me to touch that?" "She won't bite. She might sneeze, though. Fair warning." She gritted her teeth and reached forward, muttering under her breath. "This has got to violate some kind of human rights agreement." Cal laughed but didn't argue. He simply stepped aside and let her fumble through the process with Clover while he moved down the line. It was messier than she expected, and slower, and the cow was warm in a way that was disconcerting, like it reminded her this was a living thing, not a prop for punishment. "You'll get faster," Cal said after 20 minutes of watching her with mild patience. Eventually. After the milking, there was feeding. Buckets of grain and hay, each heavier than she expected. Her arms ached, her back screamed. She hadn't felt this drained in years. Not after a Barry's boot camp class, not after hiking in Italy, not even after flying across 3 time zones for an impromptu party in Ibiza. This was a different kind of tired. A bone-deep, no-filter exhaustion that felt like it came from the earth itself. And she hated that part of her liked it. At lunch, she collapsed into a chair in the kitchen, wolfing down a sandwich May handed her without asking what was in it. "You'll want to hydrate," May said gently, refilling her glass. "You look flushed." "I look like hell," Delilah said. "Let's not sugarcoat it." "Hell or not, you're still standing," May replied with a wink. In the afternoon, she was assigned to shadow a young man named Jesse, Cal's nephew, who was helping with fence repairs along the outer edge of the property. He was about her age, maybe a little older, with a sunburnt face and hands like sandpaper. "You from the city?" he asked, eyeing her skeptically. "Guilty," she said. "You?" He snorted. "I'm from Hollow Creek, born here, probably die here." "Sounds bleak," she muttered. "Not really. Depends on what you're looking for." They spent the next few hours hammering posts, tightening wires, adjusting sagging sections of wood that had surrendered to time or weather. Jesse didn't talk much. When he did, it was short and dry, but she appreciated the lack of small talk. And by the end of it, when her hands were blistered and her legs covered in dried mud, she almost didn't mind that the sun was setting and she was still expected to haul water for the chicken coops before dinner. That night, lying in bed, body aching in places she didn't know had muscles, Delilah scrolled through old photos on her phone. Glamorous nights, ocean views, crowded clubs, her face flawless, her laughter perfectly posed. They all felt impossibly distant, like she was looking at someone else entirely. She closed the screen and let the silence of the farmhouse settle around her. Somewhere outside, an owl called. Somewhere beyond that, the world she'd known continued without her. But here, in the middle of nowhere, with no parties, no praise, no escape, she was something she hadn't been in years. Still, the second day had broken her nails. The third had broken her pride. The fourth, she wasn't sure yet. But there was a flicker in her chest that hadn't been there before. Not a full spark, not a flame, but something. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't exile. Maybe it was a beginning. But she wasn't ready to admit that, not even to herself. Not yet. The rain came like a warning. Not in gentle taps, but in wild sheets that turned the fields to rivers and the paths to sludge. It started sometime in the early morning hours, before the rooster had crowed and before Delilah had even stirred in her narrow bed. When she opened her eyes, the light was gray, and the farmhouse windows rattled in their frames. Outside, the sky looked bruised, the clouds heavy with a kind of grief that had nothing to do with weather and everything to do with what was about to come. Downstairs, May was already in her rain gear, a bright yellow coat zipped up to her chin and rubber boots that reached her knees. She handed Delilah a similar set of gear, with the kind of calm that came only from living a life where nature was the boss, and you were just here to follow instructions. "You'll want a double socket," she said, handing her a pair of thick woolens. "Nothing worse than wet feet when you've got 10 acres to cross." Delilah took the items in silence, trying not to let her dread show. After almost 3 weeks, she had found her rhythm, or something like it. Her hands were tougher now, her back stronger, and she no longer gasped every time a calf bumped into her or a rooster darted across her path. But the storm felt different, and when Cal came in 10 minutes later with water dripping from the brim of his hat and mud up to his knees, his face was tight with something that wasn't worry, but wasn't far from it. "Creek's rising faster than expected," he said, setting down his gloves. "We've got a potential flood situation on the eastern pasture. That runoff cuts close to the equipment shed, and we can't afford to lose that." He looked at Delilah then. Really looked at her, and there was no challenge in his eyes anymore, just a quiet expectation. "We're gonna need all hands." She swallowed. "What do you need me to do?" The question came out before she had the chance to second-guess it, and even she was surprised by the steadiness of her voice. Cal gave a nod, like he'd expected her to say that all along. "Sandbags first, then we'll start herding the young ones uphill." The truck ride to the low pasture was miserable. Rain needled her face. The wind sliced sideways and her boots were already soaked through. Jesse was in the back with the sacks, barking instructions like a field commander, while Cal drove and Delilah huddled beside him, clutching a thermos May had forced into her hands. They reached the shed just as the first surge of runoff lapped at its foundation. The fields around them had become a shallow lake, water curling around tractor tires and fence posts like it was looking for something to destroy. "We work fast, or we lose everything," Cal said, already out of the truck and into the rising water. Jessie tossed a sandbag at her, and she caught it with a grunt, the weight of it pressing into her arms like regret. For the next hour, they built, shoulder to shoulder, bag after bag, stacking, bracing, dragging more from the truck. The water bit at their legs, the wind stole their breath, and there was no pause. No one asked if she needed a break. No one offered a reprieve, and she didn't want one. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't performing. She wasn't posing or pretending or proving anything. She was just doing the damn work. And somehow, that was enough. Once the wall was built and the shed safe, they turned their attention to the cattle, specifically the youngest in the herd, the ones least likely to fend for themselves if the water kept rising. Delilah had come to recognize them all by now. There was Star, the calf she'd fed with a bottle on her third day, the one with the moon-white patch on her forehead. There was Pepper and Bean and Luna, each one now familiar, each one now hers in a way she hadn't expected. She helped guide them up the slope to higher ground, waving arms, clicking her tongue, gently pushing the stubborn ones along. Her hair was soaked, her clothes clung to her like a second skin, and when one of the calves slipped in the mud, she dropped to her knees without hesitation to pull it up. By the time the rain slowed and the floodwaters began to recede, the sun was beginning to set in smudges of orange and purple across the bruised sky. Cal clapped her on the back, hard enough to make her stagger. "Not bad, city girl," he said. "You earned your dinner tonight." Jessie just gave a tired nod and slung another sandbag back into the truck bed. "Didn't think you had it in you," he muttered. Delilah didn't bother responding. She was too tired, too sore, too alive. And when they finally made it back to the farmhouse, May was waiting with towels and bowls of steaming stew and bread, so fresh it still steamed. "Sit," she said, and Delilah did. She sat and ate, and didn't care that her fingers were still dirty or her hair was a tangled mess. There was no one to impress, just people who had seen her at her worst and still made sure she had a full plate. Later that night, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, toweling off her face, and stared at the girl staring back. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright, and there was a smear of dirt near her temple she hadn't noticed. Her nails were chipped. Her lips were bare. And yet, for the first time, she didn't want to change a thing. She looked like someone real, someone who had fought through something and come out the other side not polished but tested. She thought of her father, of the way he had looked at her before he left, of the pain in his voice when he said he didn't recognize who she was becoming. And she wondered what he would say now if he saw her. Would he see her? Or would he still be looking for the girl she used to be? She didn't know, but for the first time in a long time, she cared what the answer might be. As she climbed into bed, the thunder far off in the distance, her body aching in that honest, earned kind of way, Delilah Everhart didn't reach for her phone. She didn't scroll through old photos or text friends who hadn't noticed she'd vanished. She simply closed her eyes and let the silence settle in. It was the silence of work finished, of fears faced, of something breaking open and something new beginning to grow. Not loud, not fast, but sure and real. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. The last morning came with a stillness Delilah hadn't felt since arriving in Hollow Creek. No clanging buckets, no barking dogs, just the hush of a waking farm wrapped in early sunlight, a gold so soft it felt like forgiveness. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, the quilt May had stitched wrapped around her shoulders, and stared at the worn wood floor beneath her feet. Her suitcase was already packed, everything folded neatly, deliberately, her old designer clothes resting on the bottom like fossils from a different life. The flannel shirts, the faded jeans, the work boots. Those were going with her. They were part of her now. Not a costume, not a punishment, just truth. Downstairs, breakfast was quiet. May had made her favorites: biscuits with honey from the backyard hives, poached eggs, hot tea steeped just right. Jesse was already out in the fields, and Cal sat at the head of the table reading the newspaper with his usual squint. When she entered, he looked up, eyes soft beneath the brim of his old ball cap. "Morning, city girl," he said, but the name had lost its bite. Now it felt like an inside joke, like something earned. "Morning," Delilah replied, taking her seat. "Last day," May said, not looking up as she stirred the jam. "You've done well, honey." Delilah nodded. "I had good teachers. They didn't make a fuss. That wasn't the way here." But there was a quiet reverence to the meal, the way people eat when they know something's ending. When the truck finally pulled into the driveway just after 9, it wasn't a limousine or anything dramatic, just a sleek black SUV with the Everhart emblem on the door and a driver who looked mildly uncomfortable on the gravel path. And behind the wheel, stepping out into the sun in jeans and a collared shirt instead of his usual armor of suits and silence, was Dominic Everhart. He looked different. Maybe it was the clothes. Maybe the lines around his eyes had softened. But when he saw his daughter standing on the porch in borrowed boots with the morning light spilling across her shoulders, something in his face cracked open. "Delilah," he said, voice low. "You look—" She waited, arms crossed. "Like a cowgirl?" "No," he said after a breath. "You look like yourself." She stepped down off the porch, the old wood creaking under her. "You're early." "Couldn't wait," he said simply. They stood face to face in the drive, and for a moment neither spoke. So much had passed between them, words said and unsaid, anger, guilt, pride, confusion. But in the silence something settled. A truce, a reckoning. "I thought I was sending you here to fix you," Dominic said at last, hands in his pockets. "But I think I just needed you to see where I came from. And maybe I needed to remember too." Delilah looked toward the barns, the fields, the rising hills beyond. "This place doesn't fix you. It just doesn't let you hide." He nodded. "You ready to come home?" She tilted her head. "Not the way I left it." They said goodbye on the porch. May hugged her tightly, pressing a small brown paper bundle into her hands. "For the plane," she said, "and something else inside." Cal gave her a one-armed embrace, nodding once. "You ever want to come back?" he said. "We'll find a place for you. You're not just visiting anymore." Jesse, arriving from the barn at the last second, offered only a tip of his hat and a shy half-smile. "Don't let the tech world soften you up again," he said. "You've got more grit than most." She climbed into the SUV and rolled down the window as the farm began to recede behind them. The red barn, the weathered house, the fences she'd helped mend, the fields she'd walked at dawn. She touched the wooden charm around her neck, the small carved star Cal had given her after the flood. She hadn't taken it off since. In the back seat, she opened the package May had given her. Inside were a still warm hand pie, a folded note, and something small wrapped in cloth. The note was written in looping, careful script. Delilah, you came to us storming like thunder, but you're leaving like sunrise, strong, quiet, and sure. Never forget what you found here, because it was always inside you. May. She swallowed hard, fingers tightening around the cloth bundle. When she unwrapped it, it was a small brass key on a leather string. To the tack room, the note said in pencil beneath the signature, in case you ever come back. The drive back to the airport was quiet, but not strained. Her father didn't press her for details, and she didn't offer any just yet. But when they reached the private jet, she turned to him before boarding. I want to do something, she said. Something that matters. His brow furrowed slightly. What are you thinking? The Agri-Tech division at Everhart Systems. I want to lead it. Not just for show. I want to build something that actually helps farms like Cal's. Affordable, sustainable solutions. Smarter irrigation, better livestock monitoring, AI that works for small communities, not just corporations. She looked up at him, shoulders squared. You said you wanted me to find purpose. I found it. He was quiet for a long time, then, you'll need to finish your programming coursework. Learn from the ground up. Real work. That's all I know now, she said. Good, he replied. Then let's do it. Back in the city, everything was exactly the same, and yet nothing felt familiar. The glass towers, the penthouse, the elevator that opened directly into their home, it all looked like a set now. Beautiful. Hollow. She stood in her bedroom that night, surrounded by the remnants of her old life, and began packing away things she never wanted to wear again. The heels, the handbags, the noise. She didn't throw them out, not yet, but she folded them carefully into boxes labeled Not for Now. That night, she opened her laptop and pulled up blueprints for rural solar water management. She began sketching interface mock-ups for weather-synced crop sensors. She drafted an email to Luke, asking about test results from the latest data pull on the pasture sensors. She wrote to May, asking for biscuit recipes. And she texted Jessie, just 2 words, still standing. A month ago, she had been a headline waiting to happen, a punchline in high heels. Now, she was something quieter, sharper, solid. The spoiled girl was gone. The woman who remained had grit under her fingernails and purpose in her bones. Her father had sent her to Hollow Creek to punish her, but the land hadn't punished her. It had humbled her, taught her, made her. And somewhere deep inside her, something had begun to grow, not fast, not loud, but strong and certain. A future. A name made her legacy, not just inheritance. And it started with a girl in borrowed boots who once thought the world owed her everything, and now knew the truth. The best things in life you build with your own 2 hands.